I do support a parking lot of some sort. In my household is actually divided on the topic. My wife will never go into a parking deck. I supported the last one. I have concerns, some of which I've said before, but I want to put on the record. And I also want to agree with some of the previous speakers. Everything that the Environmental Commission said, I think we should do. There should be solar panels on top of that thing. I also, Dan has an annoying habit of checking and doing homework thoroughly. So I listen very carefully to Dan. However, when I walk around town, as I walk around a lot, as Kent, during the peak periods, it's very clear to me that we need some sort of parking. The Count Basie's an asset, the movie theater is an asset, our restaurants are great assets to the town. They provide jobs. I mean, I'm totally with, I moved into town because it is a town, okay? I didn't want to live in Little Silver or whatever, where I came from Tidden Falls. I like having all this. And I think it adds to the town. And I think actually most residents would agree with that. You can't possibly move to Red Bank and not realize, duh, there's a downtown. And that is great that it's here. And I want it to be healthy and I want it to thrive. With all that said, though, there's some things that are troubling me. And this is separate from the 55 project. But one of the things we're talking about trust here. I don't like the way that was handled. I know it's a different property, but you're wondering why, some of us may there's an inside deal here. Here's somebody who got turned down and then waited long enough and sat on their property. And now, we do this special thing because the state allows us to do it, so we allow the spot zoning over there. And now he gets his little thing on the roof or whatever it is because he decided to not do anything with the property or whoever it is. And I don't like that kind of thing. I don't want to kowtow to real estate blackmail. And I don't think that's the way we should do business, and that's ultimately what it boiled down to, in my opinion. There's no pressing need to build that. It's okay, it's a piece of grass with a fence around it. It's not very attractive, but if he wants to pay taxes on it, fine. Now, getting back to this property here, so you're wondering why there's a little bit of concern here about trust. And I'm telling you, it's right next door. It's one of the reasons. That really smelled. I love you, Mayor Pat, but I didn't like that. Now, this is a different property. Okay. Parking makes sense there, I think. And we need to do it without paying taxes for it. It's got to be something in it for whoever does it. So here, my biggest real concern is that we're going to wind up with a monstrosity. I walk over there all the time. I was there today. And, if I see, when I read it, it sounded like you could build up to 8 stories. I don't know what my architect, I guess I believe him because he's an architect, but, I actually read through the thing. It sounds like you could build 8 stories. And I think that's really big for that site, too big. So, that's that thought. A lot of devil in the details. I hope some of it maybe goes underground. I think that was mentioned in some of the comments. That would be great. I have family in the Netherlands, and they love building underground garages, and it's great because you don't see them and they're not ugly. I saw those pictures of the...
They don't flood in the Netherlands?
They actually know how to build them where they don't leak. Don't ask me how.
We'll have to get a Dutch developer maybe. I like that idea.
They built one next to my father's house. It's under a lake, and I'm not even kidding you. I'm not kidding. It doesn't leak. It's dry. Anyway, so... The peak periods are a mess. During the day is manageable. I don't want to get into the details now about Red Bank Catholic parking and not. I've given videos to the parking committee. I mean, there's use there. There's a lot of businesses that are also using it to park. They have their employees there during the day, and I understand we need to park, and employees need places to park. But the 4-hour limit's kind of a joke. Everybody's there all day until it clears out. Fine. Okay, there's a number of business advocates whom I'm fans of, but I don't like it when you guys say, the Grove is doing this, and this is what's going to happen, when Kirshner does this and whatever. This is a great place. We have the river. We have amazing towns around us. Red Bank is a viable town. I lived here back in, and I've been going here since the 80s. And in some ways, I miss that bank. I miss having the Korean market downtown. Yeah. Okay? I don't shop in a lot of this stuff in town. Now this is too expensive for me and Amy. So I have kind of mixed feelings about this amazing success that we have downtown. Maybe some of the rents are too high. There's market factors, and there's Amazon. There's lots of things that going into the successful. I got a feeling, like I said, I'm sure, you know, we'll probably build this thing, and there's going to be another issue, and you're going to have the business community here, you know, about something else. I'm sure that's going to happen, and I'll be here probably barking about something else too. But this is, you know, I do agree that parking is short. I also think that actually people living in the downtown is a good thing. I know that we haven't done a lot of it here. I'm not against that. I just want it done well and nice. But I do think it's unrealistic to expect this to lower taxes. I mean, you know, people live, send people to schools. Services are needed. Infrastructure has to be improved. We have old infrastructure. Police services are needed. So maybe we'll get a little bump here and there and a tax stop here and there, but by and large, I don't think we're going to see, you know, it's not going to get cheaper probably in town. Let's see. So it troubles me a little bit that there's always seems to be this rush thing. And I know that the merchants are hurting. I hear it. And I actually technically own a business in Red Bank too. I don't have a storefront though. And you know, I'm struggling too. But it's more important that we do this right. I mean, you know, what Dan said about the space and how many spots, I mean, we've got to check all these details before we put this stuff on the books and get proposals in here. Then we'll wind up getting in a lawsuit because we got some development that meets the criteria and you don't like it and you say no to them and they say, well, I invested this much money, what are you going to do for me now? You know, we have to be careful with these things that we put out. And the last thing is that I think, this hasn't been mentioned yet, but one of the negatives you hear about Red Bank, and I heard this yesterday when I was in Ocean Grove, it's not even the parking, it's getting to our town. I mean, you know, going from exit 109, coming from Eatontown, I mean, going by the Grove, as a matter of fact, and going that whole, I mean, it feels like you should take the train and put it up on a big long bridge through town, because part of the problem with Red Bank is just getting into town. I mean, there are times it takes me 15 minutes to get here from the Parkway. It's so backed up down Newman Springs Road. So there's a regional component to some of this. And I'm not sure if it's addressable, but maybe we should long-term do some of the thinking about this. And that's the thing, the bottom line that really bugs me is that this master plan that we have not adopted, we've changed it a little bit, and the spot zoning that we do, we really got to have a plan that takes this whole thing and looks at it in the whole way. And I'd be a lot more comfortable with this if we did that. Thank you.
Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mayor. William Meyer, 12 Mama Street. I have a building here, and I heard Anthony speaking about taxes. I just want to mention that when I finished the building and reconstructed it, between the taxes at the end of that project and today, I'm up 600%, just about. That's quite substantial considering the fact that the services that we had back when it was finished and it was being constructed were far greater than the services we have now. The problem with Red Bank is spending money. It's the cost of government that is driving taxes up. It's not going to be the business district, and that gentleman that said the percentages are about the same, he's probably correct. There are a lot of factors to why we're struggling a little bit in Red Bank, and one of the items that was brought up a little while ago that people don't consider was that Fort Monmouth has left, and all those people have moved down south. That's I've seen numbers, $5 billion in this greater area economy gone, and that's part of the pinch. Jay Herman has said in the past, and I agreed with him, that it's important that the cost of parking be considered. The other costs in connection with this project, and I'll tell you, I don't like the process, I don't like the redevelopment aspect of it. It takes the focus away from what we're talking about. I agree with everybody in here that says we need some kind of a parking garage. But this process is not focused on getting a parking garage, it's focused on rezoning a large area for a developer. Because somebody believes we're going to get a free lunch out of this for parking. We're not going to get a free lunch. No one has focused on the cost or allowed us, the people, both the businesses and the residents, to be a part of this process. From the very beginning, we were talking about how we were going to be able to go to the planning board, and you, Mayor, told us, oh, you'll be able to do that later. Oh, we want a voice. No, don't worry about it. You'll have a time. This December date will come in, you can talk about it. That hasn't happened. We should have been allowed to discuss where this garage would be built and talk about building a garage without developers getting involved in it. And one thing I haven't seen or heard, which I would have loved to have heard, attack it like anybody else in the business world would attack it. Find out what type of garages could be built, what kind of area you need, and focus on a garage only. Get the spaces, don't have a developer come in there using it, don't have all this development that is going to affect the traffic flow in Red Bank. The north-south Route 35 is a disaster. The hours that the rush hour congests are expanding out. The east-west problem going from Front Street is a problem. We're going to increase these problems. There are efficient ways of getting more parking at a low cost. We aren't exploring that. All right, we're losing control over this whole thing. We could build a 4-story or some type of a parking garage with, you know, they have these prefab. They pre-stress the steel, they pour the sections, and they deliver them. I never heard anybody talk about the various types of garage and the costs. Nobody talked about that. We could have placed that on parts of White Street, kept most of White Street open, worked with Count Basie so that the people who are using Count Basie would have a convenient place to come in. We could have made White Street potentially a one-way street instead of having parallel parking. We could have had angled parking, increased a lot of spaces there. The other factor that no one is really addressing is when this monstrous developer comes in, and he is only going to have the goodness of us businesses pre-existing in his thoughts, of course. Yeah, that's quite, all right? So we are going to get screwed. They're going to be eating up this parking lot. People aren't going to be able to park in here. The traffic is going to be a nightmare. We're going to lose our customers during this time period. Why? Because we're making a mountain instead of a parking garage. We're just increasing the mass, and they're going to need those spaces. And for years, nobody has done anything about forcing a business that expands to put money into a parking fund so that we would have money now for a parking garage. All right, so now you look at the bond ordinances. I told you, please don't go out and put these parking meters and go for a $2 million or $2.5 million bond ordinance. We don't need it. There were ways to not do that, and I'm positive we could have done that successfully and exchanged meters for the cost of the bonding attorney alone. So that $2.5 million could go to a $14 million parking garage, which I think we could do for $10 million. So now that's $2.5 million off of the $10 million. We own the lot. If it's our lot, why do we have to have a redevelopment plan? It is the borough's lot. You can put this parking on the end. You're not going to mess up rights of way that exist. You're not going to drive customers out because they can't use that lot for the year or year and a half. Okay? Now the other thing you could do is there's River Center, I understand, has a $500,000 a year. All right? I would rather see, and I've been paying into it, and I calculated the amount of money I paid into River Center, what that might be worth if it had been invested during that time period. It's a staggering amount of money over the years I've been there. At $500,000 a year, what you should be doing is redirecting River Center's money for the parking garage. You take the $2.5 million you've wasted on, in my opinion, wasted on water meters, a well that's $1 million or $1 million, whatever that's going to be, another waste of money. Apply the River Center money. You can pay for this garage in a few years and get it under control. But that's what a business would do. But it doesn't seem to happen here. And this is just foolishness to do it this way. We need a parking garage. We need the spaces. That developer is going to use these spaces. We're going to be chasing our own tail. We're going to have a parking problem right after it. And to say that these that 20 years out we're going to have these self-driving cars. That's foolishness. We are right now building, we are like in 1920 or 1915, 1920, building a carriage and horse barn while cars are coming out, and we're not going to need anything to a barn for horses anymore, because the future is self-driving cars. Uber's doing it in Pittsburgh. They're successful. Mr. Lavetti put a wonderful video on. It shows the Tesla vehicle. The gentleman gets in his car, it drives highway, streets, everything, never touches the steering wheel, drops him off at his office building, goes to a parking lot all filled, goes outside in the street and finds a parallel parking spot, parks after it let its owner out, and it's there for him when he's going to leave. That's going to happen. Uber is going to be circulating these vehicles with no drivers in it, and I think in a few years, and Mr. Lavetti made that point too, none of these experts that we spent all this money for, and I'd like to have that money back to put into the parking garage instead of spending it on this redevelopment. And I think the redevelopment is going to have some legal problems. So we may end up voting for something that goes into court for 2 years and really messes everybody up. It's foolish. This should be all looked at on a professional level and done properly. And it hasn't been. It's not going to help anybody. We have other solutions that could have been done to help the businesses that I would support. And then we can build this garage. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Lee, you had your hand up for a while. Lee?
Me? Kate.
Kate.
Hi, how are you? Hey, everybody.
Then the gentleman in front of you,
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Kate Trigiano. I live at 22 Layton Ave. I grew up working in this town, worked at Funkin' Standard when I was little. I was a store manager of Green Street before giving birth to my son. So I've been on both ends of this spectrum. I've had bosses calling me like, why are we meeting our sales goals, and explaining to them parking in town. I've worked with, people saying I can't find parking, so I get it. We do need more parking. I'm also the vice chair of the Environmental Commission, so I helped work on that language. The one thing I want to say that hasn't been said tonight, and hasn't been addressed tonight, from the resident aspect, and we just used this space, right? Like 2 months ago for the Halloween parade, and the middle school band played in the parking lot. Now why was that the location for this event? And let me tell you why. Because we have these beautiful parks, and they're on the line, of the town. But why do we have Oyster Fest also in this parking lot that is so necessary for our town? Why are we having these events there? And the reason why is because it's the natural heart of the town. That's why we keep having these things there. You can have a great kitchen table, but if it's on this side of your house, you're not using it. You're eating in the other. You're eating in the other room. So we need everything to be in the right space. So when we were looking at those plans, there were some that had a great amount of communal space. So I think that's really important to take into account. So I disagree that we should just focus on just parking there, because there's a reason why we as a community keep using this space that we need so desperately for all these other purposes. So I think when we worked on the language with the Environmental Commission, we're not, we're never going to naysay the fact that we need more parking. I experience it all the time. I still work in town. It's very difficult to find it. But let's put the teeth in the proposal. Let's get forward thinkers that understand that, this is a very precious parcel of land that is used by residents and the business owners equally and in very different ways. And let's make it the most beautiful thing that anybody's ever seen, because it is terrifying that Middletown is putting that town center in. And it is really terrifying how much money is about to get poured into Monmouth Mall. My husband's a manager with Apple, and when you look at what these places are talking about doing, it is no joke, and it could decimate our town. It is terrifying. So, it's not this ooey gooey lovey-dovey hippy-dippy language to say we want more electric car parking. It's not because we love trees so much that we're like, we need more open space. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's also because we're smart, forward thinkers. I'm 28, I'm a homeowner in town. I invested here because I like the quality of life. I like walking places. I want our master bike plan to go through. Okay, so for that to make sense, you need a bike route through this development. If you want to, appeal to these younger people that are investing in Asbury Park and other places, we need to be forward thinking. So more green space is good for all of us, and yes, more parking. It can all be accomplished with the right developer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Benjamin, 44 Irving Place in Red Bank. I got a lot of questions on this because all I'm hearing over here is everything everybody keeps saying is parking garage, and that isn't what this says. This is basically saying that they can build an 8-story building, 200 apartment units, 200,000 square feet of office and retail space, and 750 spaces now. Is that about right? That's my gist of it. I mean, if we're looking at a parking garage, that's one thing. Then we just run cash flow numbers. We're back to where we were in '05, but now instead of being an extra 250 spaces, we're talking an extra 500 spaces at my cash flow. This doesn't cash flow. A, something I haven't heard one person say about here, you kind of touched on it. You said that commercial buildings are spending 2/3 of their taxes on education. Okay, in the last year, correct me if I'm wrong, we've had proposals or completions of about 300 units in town. We're looking at adding about another 200 apartment units. How many kids are we putting in the school system in the primary and the lower educations? How many? Does anybody, if we talk 1.6 kids per unit, we're talking about putting,
that number.
there's about 1.6 kids per every household, right?
How many kids are, this is probably.
Yeah, I'm just using raw numbers here, okay? I'm not.
Your number is not appropriate because.
Then let's say one kid per household.
That are coming out of both West Side Lofts as well as Union Square. I think it's only one kid, between 1 or 2 children between both of those units.
But we have to look at how many kids this whole thing is going to put in.
Yeah.
How many kids are we going to put in there? I mean, we haven't even gotten to the cash flow of this. Why is government, you have to remember, I don't deal with towns and states. I deal a lot with the Fed. So I always view everything as worst case. This is worst case. Let's take the worst case on this. Why is the town getting involved in retail and business office space? That's for these guys to do. That's their job. They deal with that. Now you're going to compete with them. And what happens if the town can't rent out a unit? Are you going to give away some of those spaces that were previously open to these folks? We don't know. That's not in here. There's a lot more questions in this than it answers. And it's very, very dangerous what you've put together. Not because it was intentional, it was put together with good intentions. But if you look at it from the worst case situation, this thing can blow up in all our faces. And yes, he said you have to come back to the council if we go past, the numbers. And when I said 200,000 square, or 100,000 square feet of retail, that was without the setbacks, using the full lot, whatever it is, 43,000 square feet per acre, I think it is. So you're 2.5 times that. That's a lot of retail. And you're taking that retail and you're going to compete against these guys. Now they're all paying taxes. There's no taxes on this right now. We haven't even gotten into whether who's funding it. Are we going to issue a municipal bond for this?
I'm not
or are we going to
use
use
that?
Because I don't see a bank doing this loan.
Okay, those are different issues, but this.
But
is
it's not even
private
addressed in
finance.
here. The cash flow of this is never even addressed. At least if we had a parking garage, then we can all sit down and say, okay, this is what we're going to cash flow this out at. And we're back to where we were 11 years ago. But we haven't even done that. This ordinance is not well written for what it's trying to do. I understand that they need a parking garage, they do. And there's a lot of options that we have that aren't even addressed in either this or the 14 report. All that did was just tell us what we have. It doesn't tell us where we need to get to and how to get to it. We have 2 lots sitting over here by the train station that are empty every night. We have lots sitting all over town that are empty every single night. The one on 157, I think there's probably about 150 spaces sitting over there. Has the town ever approached anybody that owns these lots to see if we can rent them to use them for either concierge parking or even charging? You have the Pazzo building. Half that that building sits there empty during the day. But when we go over to the White Street lot during the day, it's all permit parking. Why aren't we renting that and permit parking up there? It's only 250, 300 spaces, paces to that lot. Why aren't we putting anybody up there? We're using up all of the White Street lot during the day for the permit parking. And I'm not even getting into the RBC stuff. I mean, we're not looking at the bigger picture. We're trying to force something here that is so broad that if we give it to someone and let them run with it, we don't know where we're going to come back on. And once we run with it, and it's out there, you know as well as I do, it's an animal. It's not going to end. We have to do something for these guys. You know, granted, a parking garage at White Street is only going to impact a smaller group of the commercial entity as a whole town. But this is our primary stuff. But this doesn't work. It didn't work 11 years ago. It's not going to work now. It's not going to cash flow, and the town's going to be on the hook for it. And it doesn't get them what they need. All it does is get them more competition and maybe a couple spaces. And that's not right. It really isn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Mr. Mayor, can I clarify something? This gentleman, I don't recall his name, but
Mr. Beck.
Mr. Reardon spoke.
Mr. Reardon, okay.
Mr. Reardon spoke to it, Mr. Meyer spoke to it, and this gentleman spoke to it. And if I can quote this gentleman, he said it doesn't cash flow. I think that some of the residents who have spoken don't understand that this proposal is not for the borough to pay for it, to borrow any money. This is for a developer to pay for it. So in terms of it not cash flowing, that's irrelevant. That's not your concern. It's not, you're not building it, you're not borrowing the money, you're not paying for it. So it has to cash flow, it has to pay for itself because it costs you nothing. And a developer's
Well,
gonna...
there's another alternative.
Excuse me?
The plan could be so off that nobody's going to bid on it.
Well, that remains
That's
to
a
be...
possibility
That
also,
remains
yeah.
to be seen. Of course, it's a possibility, but I think it's important for these gentlemen to understand that the proposal you've written requires you to pay zero, nothing. In exchange, you're going to get a huge rateable. The commercial properties are going to go up, their ratables are going to increase, and there's going to be a huge benefit. And the residents are going to benefit from all of that. But the important thing that I hear these people not understanding is this is not being built on your dime. If it's built at all, it'll be a developer. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for clarifying.
Well, Jay, I just wanted to come back here and remind you that this is a borough asset, so we do have the investment in it because we own it.
Well, sure, but
it's not just that it's zero because it is a borough asset.
it clearly is a borough asset, but anything the developer does to it is going to increase the value of the borough asset enormously. So it's only going to go up from where it is now. It can't go down. Thank you.
Bill, file.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Bill Brooks, 77 Tower Hill Avenue, Red Bank. I have a question. I'm not sure which one of the experts did it. The residential parking, if this plan is adopted, and any retail parking will be responsible for spaces outside of this garage? Is that what this proposal is saying?
Anthony?
No.
Well, it was mentioned that way, that
No, I think there's confusion.
No, any residential or non-residential development that occurs as part of the redevelopment of this property has to provide their own parking pursuant to the requirements of the redevelopment plan.
would that be spaces within this or spaces outside it?
It's envisioned to be spaces within it.
All right, so if you're adding that, you're looking at a whole lot more than 773 spaces.
Well, the 773 number is public parking spaces, so anything that's
Okay.
non-public,
We're playing semantics here. Does this garage address the residential parking and any retail needs or potential inside it within the confines of the proposed
yes.
garage?
Yes,
All right,
yes.
okay, that's one. Everybody Mayor and members of the council was talking about the redevelopment at Fort Monmouth, the potential that's going to go on in Middletown, the town center, and a Grove. There's one thing they all have in common. They have a 4-lane state highway that runs past every one of them. Anybody that's tried to drive down West Front Street around 4 o'clock knows it can take a while. We can only get so much water through the pipe. And we don't really have a way to enlarge the pipe. It's a fact. We're not putting a 4-lane road on West Front. Broad Street's pretty full the way it is. White Street's skinny. We've all tried to get in and out of it. So, and as the mayor is well aware, a lot of these folks are talking about being here 17 years, 25 years. I've been here 68 years.
You were born then.
No, I was not. My parents moved here when I was either 11 or 13 months old, I'm not sure. So I took the short side. I know you were. I'm almost as old as the dirt the town's on, not quite. But if you look at the old pictures of this town, some of which are Danny Dorn's, there's not a whole lot of new buildings that don't show in pictures from like 1890 on Broad Street and Monmouth Street. These buildings have been here a while. There is no doubt that we have a parking issue, and these gentlemen certainly need more parking. So do all the residents in this town. I think the main concern, Mayor, and it's been addressed, is if we could get a delineation of exactly what the steps are going forward from this and what the public's input can be from it, a lot of the residents would probably feel better. Get it out in the open. Now, anybody who's tried to drive in this town knows what it's like to find a parking place. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
Good evening, everybody. Alan Placer, Hobby Masters, 62 White Street. Also grew up on Elm Place, where my family still lives. Life member of the First Aid in Red Bank. A lot vested in this town. I think a lot of the residents here have made it very clear to the council they're not understanding the process. The business owners, we've all taken it upon ourselves. A year ago, I didn't have a clue what the process was. Because we have a higher vested interest closer to our front doors, we've taken it upon ourselves to learn what the process is on the garage. And I think it's something that does need to be explained, not only here tonight, but maybe get it out to Red Bank Green, make it a little clearer to everybody. For the residents, they look at this and they see 8-story, and it's created, oh my God, what a scare of an 8-story monstrosity. That word monstrosity is coming up so much. And they don't realize the FAR, and even I don't understand all the math of it. But it needs to be understood that that's not even what we're voting on tonight. What we're voting on tonight is the plan to go forward. Not voting on an 8-story building, a 6-story building, a 5-story building. It's just on saying, yes, this plan has a basic guideline. Could somebody come through and propose an 8-story from end to end of the property and make it work in those numbers? Maybe. But if they did, when it comes back to the board again, we're going to have to be in Count Basie for all the residents that will be protesting it and the businesses. So people have to understand that we're not at that step, and no developer is going to propose a thing like that because another developer is going to propose something nicer than that and more feasible that you guys would vote yes on. And I want the residents to also understand that the businesses are so vested in this that we're meeting at least weekly, phone calls all the time between the Red Bank Business Alliance, the River Center, the council members. You have the best business knowledge that the town can offer, all putting their input together to make sure that this plan has been written right, it's been edited very well, and going forward to make sure everything is done properly. The businesses also thought that there maybe was some insider thing going on. And believe me, the last couple of weeks, the phone calls were going out and extra meetings were had, because we know, we don't trust them any more than you guys do. So we're on top of it, and we are working hard, and the businesses will squash this if it's not economically viable for Red Bank either, because we're part of Red Bank and we pay the taxes in this town. So everybody's got to understand the steps better. and how it benefits the town, and I'm going to put back to all you guys to make sure that that's clear, hopefully by the end of the night for the people that are in here, and then going forward, how the process is going to work and how everybody will get to put more input in as to what the design is going to be like and how the traffic's going to flow, and how we actually make money off of this. I think we make $2.5 million a year off of parking. Right now off of revenue, so to say doubling the parking spaces that we have isn't going to pay for a $14 million building, well, that's just bad business sense to even think that. But we're not even on that step yet, and that's important to remember. When it gets to the numbers point, when somebody proposes, we'll have maybe 8 proposals in front of the town to look at, and different ones will have different number of parking and residential and commercial use, and we'll look at all the numbers that those spaces can financially make, and decisions will be made based on which of those plans is going to be best for the town financially, looks-wise, use-wise, environmentally-wise. We're not there yet, though. This is just the beginning step. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, could you just give a brief synopsis of the process?
Sure.
Getting started.
Yeah. Again, if this plan is adopted this evening, this really is just, in essence, a zoning ordinance. This is borough. This is. I'm sorry. This is a borough-owned property. So what we have suggested is to go through what's been talked about tonight is the request for proposal process, where the governing body or a subcommittee of the governing body, however you guys choose to do that, can evaluate various proposals. And that could be as public a process as you want to make it. Ultimately, if a developer is selected, there would be a redevelopment agreement entered into between the borough and that developer, and all the economics would be in that agreement. That again would be a public process in terms of vetting it. Once there would be an ongoing negotiation process once you select whoever you think is most qualified and what you want built there and how it's built. But the process, that's at least how I would, and under the redevelopment law, you could select any redeveloper you choose as qualified and appropriate. But it would seem to me best to go through some sort of procurement process, so it's a fair and open process that solicits as many different proposals from developers as who are interested in trying to build this project.
Okay, thank you. Who else had their hand up? Let's give an opportunity to people who haven't spoken. Carl, come on up.
If I may just request the permission.
Well, you can have the permission, but you're not going to be 45 minutes, are you?
I just
Okay. I didn't think so. I know you're a brief
respectfully
man.
don't want to tip over on you. Hello?
Feeling better?
Much.
You look good.
Thank you. And likewise yourself, Your Honor.
We have a similar issue.
My name is Carl DeAngelis, and my family has owned a commercial property on Monmouth Street for about 55 years. I've owned a small office condominium on Maple Avenue for about 35 years. My sister has been a resident for about 35 years as well. I am on the River Center. I'm on the Visual Improvement Committee and the Finance Committee and the board of River Center, none of which I'm here to speak on behalf of tonight. I speak solely on my own personal behalf. I don't think anything needs to be added to Jim's comments. But what I want to say is that we don't need to debate the issue of the necessity for more parking. From the time I was a little kid, I can remember my mother driving around the block a few times to just shop for school clothes. Our particular building is very fortunate to have the unique feature of 16 of its own parking places. And because of that, I don't really speak as someone in need of parking myself personally. We do provide those spaces to our favorite neighbor, the Count Basie, when they're well attended, which is more and more and more often, and a very, very good thing for Red Bank. In my observation over these past several decades, of course, I've seen the evolution and transition, and of most recent couple, the real renaissance and burgeoning of Red Bank that I think is in large part attributable to the vision of some prior administration, as well as the absolute ongoing efforts of the River Center itself. As a result of all that, Red Bank has really become the place to go, the place to be. It has in its own right become a destination, and as such, many people are attracted to Red Bank from outside of the immediate area, and they want to come here to shop, they want to come here to have entertainment, to dine, and many to work. That factor, I believe, has exceeded Red Bank's capacity to accommodate the patronage that it attracts. And I know in my personal experience and the experiences of other business owners with whom I am personally familiar, that it is often the case where people come to Red Bank with the intention of patronizing, shopping, dining, what have you, and maybe it's partially because they're not totally familiar with the town and all the nooks and crannies in the town, but they wind up coming and then leaving before they ever get out of their cars. And that's an increasingly common occurrence. And I think there's plenty of anecdotal evidence of that if you speak to almost any business owner. So what I'm saying is, unquestionably, Red Bank has always needed more parking. It has become more acutely necessary now than ever before, and it's in large part attributable to how Red Bank has developed as to the point that it is today. I make no distinction between the business community and the residential community. I think that they both benefit each other. All I'm saying about this plan is that the primary purpose and objective must be to provide more parking. Whether we're talking about a parking plan attendant to a development or a development attendant to a parking plan, I don't really think is relevant. I don't think it's particularly relevant who pays for it or how it's paid for. I don't think there's any question that it can be done tastefully, aesthetically, beautifully, economically, environmentally, all of the above very, very well. But the net bottom line, I ask everyone at this stage of the process and as the process goes forward, remain mindful and intend